This is Charlotte Talks. I'm Mike Collins. On the local news roundup, Charlotte is a Major League Soccer city. Panthers owner David Tepper scores a win as he, Mayor Lyles, and MLS Commissioner Don Garber make the announcement. The historic Excelsior Club gets a new lease on life as a new plan emerges with help from the county and the city. Both will kick in $50,000. Charlotte's two hospital systems want to expand their territory and are battling over beds. Atrium, of course, wants them all. And even though the Panthers have had a disappointing season, Christian McCaffrey and Kuechly have a postseason game to play. They're both headed to the 2020 Pro Bowl. Our roundtable of reporters is ready to detail those and other stories, and seated around this table are the illustrious David Borax, who joins us from WFAE News. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
Katie Peralta is senior editor at Charlotte Agenda. Welcome back.
Morning.
Nick Oxner is here. He's the chief investigative reporter for WBTV News. Hello.
Ho, ho, ho.
Yes, and Joe Bruno is a reporter for WSOC TV, Channel 9 Eyewitness News. Don't worry, Joe. Nick's on your side.
Yes. Good morning.
We're all on the radio, and you can watch us on Facebook Live. Here's something we might be hearing a lot of beginning in 2021. What are they chanting?
CLT, CLT.
It sounds like CCL to me. I listened to it 5 times yesterday. I thought, what are they chanting? So it's CLT. So they're in favor of the airport. After several years and at least one false start this week was the worst kept secret. The worst kept secret in Charlotte was finally let out of the bag.
Now it's my pleasure to welcome Charlotte to Major League Soccer as our 30th team.
MLS Commissioner Don Garber on Tuesday morning announcing Charlotte as the home for the league's 30th expansion team, saying it was the right decision at the right time. All of you were there for this unsurprising announcement. What was the atmosphere like, aside from the chants?
It was celebratory. As you can hear, they were chanting CLT,
Thank you.
not CHA, like the previous abbreviation they had. But it was something that everybody expected. It's something that Dave Tepper, I guess, technically has been working on since he, was announced as the buyer of the Carolina Panthers, and he got to work pretty quickly on making this happen. And when you have a net worth of $12 billion, you can make things happen pretty quickly.
You can buy all kinds of trinkets.
You sure can. Yeah.
Trinkets, yeah. This was held at the Mint Museum in that big open space on their main floor, and it was a room full of, yes, a lot of us reporters, but also city officials and other local business leaders. The head of Ally Bank was there. They've become a big sponsor. And there was, as we just heard on that clip, there was a big crowd of supporters from a couple of fan clubs that have already cropped up even before we got a team. And Tepper actually turned to those folks who are lining the escalators at one point and said, "We're counting on you guys." And what he means is we're counting on you guys to buy season tickets and fill that stadium.
Garber also said, the MLS commissioner also said that Charlotte is a soccer market. He said Charlotte has one of the most competitive and vibrant youth soccer markets anywhere in North America. Really?
So I play a lot, and there are multiple leagues that compete against each other for the youth soccer and for adult leagues.
Are you a youth, David?
I am, actually. And so there's a lot of players in our area, and with all of these teams, one of the things they're looking at is how is the organization connected to the local youth soccer market. I mean, those who followed the Charlotte Independents, the second level team that we have here, know that one of their big strategies for marketing is to go after those youth leagues and try and sell tickets and T-shirts and that sort of thing. I had somebody at the event the other day tell me that, if they affiliated with one of the youth soccer groups here, that's 20,000 T-shirts they're going to sell every year, and so that's a big part of this, and I think it's one of the reasons that MLS looked this way. Now, there aren't any deals with any of those youth soccer clubs yet, but I hear there are discussions going on.
Yeah, and UNC Charlotte has a great program, and Charlotte's proven time and time again tens of thousands of people will come out when major soccer matches are being played at Bank of America Stadium.
And we have for lack of a better term, minor league team already in place. What does this do to them?
They think that they can coexist with this Major League Soccer team. They're still moving forward with their plans to move into Memorial Stadium in 2021. The president of the Charlotte Independents has been talking to David Tepper. He says that they have a good relationship, and he is telling fans essentially, listen, things are going to be okay.
Okay. So Garber also said this would never have happened without Mayor Lyles and David Tepper. Tepper was the driving force, of course, behind this. And he was so excited that he felt it necessary to express himself in song. But at first, he had trouble locating the lyrics.
I don't know if I can. I'm trying to remember if I had a pen, I would have wrote it down. It was something like, well, since I came to Charlotte, I found a new place to live. It's the greatest, it's going to be the greatest city for MLS to be in.
Got to work on the rhyme scheme, Dave. Tepper called Mayor Lyles to tell her the news prior to this announcement, and he said it was the most expensive gift I've ever given a woman. How much did this set him back?
It is being reported, and Don Garber confirmed that he will pay an expansion fee of up to $325 million, which is a very significant increase from the expansion fees paid by teams 28 and 29.
Why? Because the city is also kicking in, we'll talk about this in a minute at length, but $110 million, which is more than any other city has kicked in.
Yeah, and
why?
Garber attributes this to basically the growth of the league and the growing popularity of the sport. That sort of increase is unprecedented so far in the league's growth. It is a pretty young league. I believe it was started in like 1993 or something like that. But the incremental increases in the fees have been like, $25 and $50 million, which is not exactly pocket change.
So another thing that's different this time is that, and Garber at the beginning of the press conference described that this was going to be the last team. Now, I don't think anybody believes him. I think there's definitely a possibility of a couple more teams joining in the coming years. He's got some other cities that are have good bids in the works. I think part of the issue here was that David Tepper wanted it, and he had the money, and he went to them and said, "Okay, what will it take for me to get a team here?"
So what does Major League Soccer do with $300 million? Where does the money go? Once you buy into the league, is it spread out? Is the largesse spread out among all the teams?
I believe it's spread out among the owners, yeah.
Okay.
And it goes in with all the other revenues they get, like TV revenues.
When the Charlotte Motor Speedway Group, the Bruton Smith Group, was vying for this a couple of years ago, how much were they willing to pay or going to pay?
I think that was $150 million.
Wow.
So it's more than doubled since that.
Good investment. We should all get into soccer right now. The announcement was followed by some other surprises that in all of the discussions that we've had on this program until recent weeks, I'd never heard anything about. The Eastland Mall site is going to end up being their headquarters and their practice field.
Maybe.
Okay. And we heard about the development of the Gateway corridor, which is down there by Johnston and Wales over toward the stadium on Charlotte's west side, still in third and, I guess, fourth ward or third ward. Talk about first the Eastland Mall plan, because this is a white elephant that the city has been trying to figure out what to do with for, 15 years, 10 years, something like that. And suddenly, out of the clear blue sky, it's going to be their practice facility and headquarters.
Politically, this was a very smart move for Dave Tepper and Tom Glick to present to the city council, because it makes this entire plan much more digestible. It makes it much more easy to explain by, the fact that they are breathing fresh life into this community that has kind of sat idle for the last 10 years. They see this as an opportunity to, revitalize an entire area, not just the part that will be MLS. They see it as, this will be a place for recreation along with entertainment and restaurants and bars and, a well-lit, improvements in the infrastructure and things like that. So they're really painting this as community improvement efforts.
One of the things that struck me is that there already was a plan for Eastland Mall that included potentially soccer. I mean, this is going back a few years now. I think one of the Spanish professional teams was talking about doing
FC
a training
Barcelona.
Doing a training facility there. And so this is a case where this windfall that David Tepper has brought to town fits in with an existing development plan. But one of the interesting announcements that came out in the last couple of weeks as it became clear that Charlotte was getting the team was that the Crossland Group, which is the developer the city has chosen for that area, has been putting out press releases saying, hey, we're still here, we're still doing this. this. We're really glad as if to say, this is not David Tepper's development, but it's our development still. So I think this is going to be interesting to follow.
How much of the land that the city has been trying to find a use for does this take up?
I think I've heard around 20 acres.
How much more is left?
There's 69 acres of vacant land currently, so there'll still be a good chunk of land. And Tepper told me that he wants to recruit other companies to come build on that land with him. And he also said that they're going to be purposeful in the way that they develop it because they want to make sure that the immigrant businesses that line Central Avenue are still highlighted. And he envisions something called like an international avenue, a way for those businesses to thrive.
So Dimple Ajmera, who represents that area of town on city council, Joe, told you about this plan.
I think it's been long overdue where we haven't had economic catalyst on the east side after Eastland Mall was gone. So now it's very important that we deliver on that promise.
So what do they think this will mean for that part of town?
I think they are viewing this as finally East Charlotte has a destination, something that East Charlotte residents can be proud of and visit. And this is something.
How? Because it's a headquarters for a team, which is offices,
right?
And then it's a practice field, which
there will be more there, according to this big plan that Crossland's putting.
And there will be community fields, and I'm sure there'll be a team store, and I'm sure they'll have events, tournaments, things of that nature. You think training camp, NFL football.
Yeah, think about what Tepper's pitched to build down in South Carolina, right? That's a destination as well, and that's how he clearly is working around this model of have our offices and our facilities, but turn it into a place people want to come and spend their money year round, and that parallels kind of what he's talked about with the Gateway Plaza, entertainment district as well.
One question we have asked a few city council members is how do you actually protect these businesses? Yes, it is fantastic that they've been out in the community already speaking with these folks, but there's no way to guarantee that their property values aren't going to skyrocket. There's no way to guarantee they won't be pushed out.
Well, they will skyrocket.
They will. It's great that we're cognizant of that right now, but it's just sort of a matter of time, I guess, right?
Yep. So let's talk about the other area of town that came up in this announcement, and that's the Gateway district from Bank of America Stadium to Gateway Station, which is going to be the intermodal transfer facility for the Silver Line and the streetcar and buses and Amtrak. He wants this to be like Broadway in Nashville. Never been to Nashville, don't know what that is. Tell me what it is.
It's basically a strip of bars and restaurants.
All right.
Where every bachelorette party in Nashville goes.
Music pumping out and lots of people with cups of beer in their hands.
Well, he kept saying that Charlotte loves a party, and this is going to be a party, right?
Well, think about 2021. The practice bubble they won't need it anymore because they'll be in Rock Hill for the practicing, so there'll be all that land between Bank of America Stadium and the streetcar line, and he wants to have, music venues, bars, restaurants.
So how does this work? He wants that. The city, I guess, would like to see that happen because that's economic development. How do you get people to take that area from the ground up and make it what it's going to be in 2021 or two?
I mean, I think it's going to be a whole number of things. I think that he will have to start. I mean, he already has good relationships with many of the big developers in town. I think continuing that and figuring out a master plan to make this thing a walkable area close to transit, walkable to the stadium, et cetera, or where the stadium is now.
So when we come back, I want to find out, is this a city project? Is this a David Tepper project? Is this a developer project? Is it a joint project? So much more to talk about. And also the mystery of the $110 million. Are we in or are we not in? It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and artist Herb Jackson, whose paintings are available at Heidel Brooks Gallery in Charlotte and the Art Cellar Gallery in Banner Elk. More information available at herbjackson.com. And Audubell Car Wash, offering car wash gift cards good for a variety of exterior washes and interior services. Car wash gift cards deliver Audubell Clean in Charlotte and Asheville. More info at audubell.com. Coming up Monday on this program, the television presidency of Donald Trump. Presidents have been media figures for decades, but New York Times media critic James Ponowozek says Donald Trump is television, an embodiment of the medium's bombast and addiction to conflict. He calls Trump the most influential character in the history of TV. So, Ponewozik trains his TV critic eye on the Trump presidency in his book Audience of One and talks about it with guest host Eric Spanberg on this program Monday at 9.
The Senate is, to quote Alexander Hamilton, the court, the whole court. What can we expect when Chief Justice John Roberts presides over the trial of President Trump? It's been a week for the history books, but plenty more happened besides impeachment. The Friday News Roundup next time on 1A.
The Roundup continues at 10 following the Charlotte Talks local news roundup on 90.7 WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source.
It's Charlotte Talks Local News Roundup on 90.7 WFAE and 90.3 WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. David Borax is here from WFAE News. Joe Bruno from WSOC TV Channel 9. Katie Peralta, senior editor, Charlotte Agenda, is here, and so is Nick Oxner, chief investigative reporter for WBTV Channel 3. So this gateway project that we envision, or that David Tepper envisions, between Bank of America Stadium and the Gateway Intermodal Station, Gateway Center. Is it his project? Is it developers' project? Is the city in on this in some way? How does it work?
I think it's his idea, right? And it'll be interesting. Certainly, the city seems to be excited and thrilled by the idea. I think this is something that might be in the more earlier stages as he tries to figure out. I think this is actually maybe the first answer to a longer set of questions we have about what's going to happen to the stadium and that whole land.
I remember the first time he mentioned an entertainment district and developing something uptown near the stadium was when he was first confirmed as the owner of the Panthers. The deal had not gone through yet. This was in Atlanta at the NFL owners meeting. And he mentioned something about a train station and some sort of, cool entertainment venue, and everyone was like, what? And over the next few months, we started realizing, oh, well, there actually is, at this point, like Gateway Station was so far behind where it should have been. They actually broke ground on it, right? Or they broke ground
on the track work, but not the project, and they still haven't broken ground on this project.
Right. And I think they're still looking for a backer or a private developer.
They have a list of developers, and they haven't chosen one yet.
So it sure seems like it's going to be a public-private partnership, this entertainment
the magic
district.
words.
But like a lot of things with this Major League Soccer deal, we don't know a whole lot of
So
detail.
could this accelerate this CATS transit intermodal facility being built?
Well, if Tepper wants to drop some money on it, maybe.
Yeah.
It could be something that adds to interest for a developer. And I bet they're having to go back now and look at their plans and say, oh my gosh, did we include the idea that there's going to be a soccer team here? Because the soccer team does change the equation for use of the stadium, along with all these concerts that Tepper is bringing.
Yeah. Apparently there's a Gateway District Committee that meets, and they had a meeting the day after the
I didn't
team
know we
was
had
announced.
a Gateway
Yes,
District.
and we sent a photographer to the meeting to see if they would talk about the entertainment district, and none of them seemed to know what we were talking about, and they basically started the meeting, approved the minutes.
So James Mitchell, City Councilman James Mitchell, and the chair of the council's Economic Development Committee says this is another area that Charlotte hopes to model. Another area they hope to model this district after is Detroit. Really?
James Mitchell's favorite city to go to.
I was going to say.
They have that
Does that
sport and
explain why he went up there? And
It's the closest thing to city business we've seen out of that trip.
They have that sport and entertainment use district up in Detroit, up near the Little Caesars Arena, and that's what he's comparing that to.
Mike, I just want to say, I think that by pitching the Eastland Mall and that as an economic development opportunity, and it helps the city to sell this whole soccer thing as an economic development opportunity. And, they are trying hard to sell it right now.
So what's the difference? We had this bid a couple of years ago, and there was no stadium attached, and they were going to redo a memorial stadium to put a professional soccer team in, and it kind of petered out. This time, there's great excitement, it seems, from all quarters, not just the potential owner group, but from the city itself and the mayor and the city council. And and they said yes. Major League Soccer said yes. So what's the difference?
Sorry, go ahead.
I just have a couple theories. The first thing that I think was smart was Tepper engaged Roaring Riot and helped generate fan support through the Min-City Collective group. So organically, there was starting to be
You're
build-up.
speaking Greek to me. He did what?
He helped create a fan group that's passionate about bringing Major League Soccer to Charlotte.
Okay.
I think with the last bid, a lot of people were turned off by the fact that county property tax dollars were basically funding this team, and the money would be paid back over a series of years, and basically the county fronted the money for the expansion fee. And I also think people were turned off by the fact that, the bid and the use of taxpayer dollars was happening so close to the Keith Lamont Scott riots, and people were questioning the priorities.
I remember at the time also when City Council initially declined to vote on their part of the Memorial Stadium renovation, they had said, this is not enough of a community endeavor as we'd like to see with professional sports. So we're still open to talking about MLS in the future, but they said something along the lines of it has to serve the entire community. So pitching this as something for not just the enrichment of one billionaire owner, I think is something that has made City Council and the mayor warm up to this in a pretty significant way.
The other equation is, if you recall, the other thing looming at the time was, and we all know the Panthers are going to come and ask for a new stadium, and how much is that going to cost?
That's still here.
Well, yes, but it makes you wonder, now that you have the guy who owns both, right? You maybe can work it in as part of a larger package, and it helps change the equation.
There is a lot more to this package than there was with the Smiths, and I also think that Bruton Smith, he came to the meetings, and there was this sense that we have this billionaire asking for a handout. I'm not exactly sure what's different with David Tepper, but I will say that it appears that our public officials like David Tepper in a way that they didn't like Bruton Smith. And it was interesting because the Smiths were there sitting right in front of us, and didn't really get a chance to talk to them, but,
Oh, they came to this?
they came to the announcement.
VIP guests.
Wow.
They were very cordial about it too.
Wow.
Marcus
And they praised Tepper,
and they were very happy for. I mean, at least they put out some tweet or something saying that they were glad that Charlotte won a team. It was very respectful. They also, weren't going to pay as much, first of all, but I think it was also they clearly didn't have as deep of pockets, and that's something that certainly needs to be considered. And the fact that Dave Tepper has also lined up a bunch of corporate sponsors, and there's clearly a future here from the corporate side for. And Charlotte's also better positioned, I think they would say, as a corporate community. We've landed major headquarters here over the past 2 years. We're a little bit farther removed from HB2, Keith Lamont Scott, all of the things that 2016 was.
And as Nick pointed out before we started, it was this day. Was it this day? 3 years ago? 4 years ago?
Tried to block out of my
We were
memory.
all in
3 years.
Raleigh
3 years ago.
For HB2.
Yes.
MLS Commissioner Don Garber said there were two things that stood out: David Tepper and community. Tepper wasn't part of the last bid, as we all know. Was the community not as in then as it is now? And when he says community, is he talking about people, or is he talking about City Council?
Well, think about it. 2 years, the last time we talked about this, it kind of came out of nowhere, right? The Smiths kind of said, hey guys, what if we had a soccer team? And I think I recall us talking around the same table then, well, maybe we'll warm up to that idea. And now that we've had some time to think about it, I think we're all like, well, yeah, soccer would be
They
good.
did lay the groundwork.
Yeah.
So how do you hire a coach, players, staff, build a headquarters, build a practice field, set up the old stadium, Bank of America Stadium, for a soccer entrance tunnel and new TV camera placements for soccer, all by February 2021, which I think is when the first game would be played?
Well, Tepper says that work's already being done to Bank of America Stadium, architectural design work to prepare for the improvements with that tunnel and the new locker
rooms. But you can build all that. You still got to hire a team and a coach and a staff. And
that happens every year. There's lots of turnover in professional sports, especially soccer. There will be a whole raft of players in Europe who are aging out of playing in their domestic leagues, and we may get some good players here. There'll be coaches on the market. I mean, that all happens in a little window every year.
There will be an expansion draft, too. I'm sure the other teams are kind of annoyed because every other year they have to have an expansion draft and they lose some of their players.
Does the David Tepper want aged-out players from Europe?
when we're talking about aged out players, we're talking about big names that can help draw people here. So if you remember, like when LA Galaxy hired David Beckham, or Wayne Rooney from Manchester United went to DC for a year, there's that. And then there's what Atlanta did, which is Atlanta went to Latin America and hired some of the best players from there who may not have been household names, but look at them, they're challenging for the title every year.
And speaking of Atlanta, David Tepper's enthusiasm was on display on Tuesday, and he suggested that the Charlotte team would have a strong rivalry with Atlanta United FC, the team closest to us. He said, quote, "There's another city down the road to the west. Charlotte is hot. We're the hot city. Screw that other city, okay? We're going to have one hell of a rivalry." End quote. So he is clearly a new kind of team owner for Charlotte.
Get that bleep ready.
He actually led the crowd at Brewers at 4001 Yancey in a "Screw That City" chant later that evening.
So in a private meeting behind closed doors, City Council made the decision, I think.
Have they made a decision?
We don't know. To approve incentives to the tune of $110 million, which will come from, allegedly, tourism tax dollars and be used to renovate the stadium for soccer. But they have to legally, formally approve this in a public meeting, and their last meeting of 2019 was last Monday night, the day before they announced this. So they have not approved this money. Why did they make the announcement the next day? That's a big leap of faith, isn't it, for Major League Soccer and for David Tepper?
I think
we could back out of this, right?
This goes back to that letter that Mayor Lyle sent to the league, which was basically her vouching for the idea that Charlotte was going to participate in this. And I think that guarantee was enough to persuade Don Garber and the other
Is the guarantee
commissioners.
the fact that we really, although we could back out, we really can't, because you can't make a commitment
It just
like
seems like it would be a formality, any vote on public funding right now. They wouldn't have put $110 million in that letter if they weren't committed to providing at least $110
A very specific
million.
amount.
Yes.
Although the letter is not specific, and we don't have any details still about what that $110 million would look like in any way. And
How do we spend it?
Yeah, and it just kind of says.
Do we know what it goes for? I just said stadium.
If you ask one person, they'll tell you one thing, and ask another, they'll tell you something different. But most of the people are telling me that it's spread across the stadium, Eastland, and the entertainment district. It's for everything.
But Mike, it's important. We still don't know the details, even though the mayor, in an exchange I hope we talk about in a moment with Katie, challenged us to read the closed session minutes that are now public. They still haven't released those closed session minutes, even though they should have.
There has been criticism, and Katie, you asked the mayor about how she would respond to the criticism that there wasn't a public debate or a private or a public discussion before the $110 million was agreed upon. And she seemed, you can correct me if I'm wrong after we hear the clip, she seemed to blame the media for ginning up that criticism. I want to get your take, but first let's hear what she said.
I would blame you guys. Is that what can I say that? No, I'm being, let me tell you, this is how it is. When we did the Honeywell, when we did we do a number of other economic opportunities, these were done in the same way we've done any business investment plan. So you'll get the minutes from the closed session, but when we're negotiating and we're competing against everyone else in this country, we have to have the ability to think and talk through how we do this.
Was she serious about putting the blame for being upset about not having a public conversation about this and putting the blame on the media?
I think that the suggestion was that this was more of a outrage because the media had created this story about outrage, but all we're saying is we're just saying that there are a lot of unanswered questions out there.
That could be the first politically tone-deaf thing I've ever heard her say.
I was going to say it was completely out of character, in my opinion. I've never seen her, not deliver a response that was really, at the very least, just like general.
Except all it does is verbalize the position that the city has taken with respect to transparency and openness for years. Before Mayor Lyle Miles' term, but certainly since, and it's only strengthened, we've seen the city refuse to produce public records, refuse to do business in open, refuse to talk to reporters, time and time again. If you look back to the Burger King shootings earlier this year, Dan Queer Franklin, if you look at any other issue in the city, what you get from the elected officials and the city staff is, this is how it's going to be, and it's because we said it that way, and if you don't like it, so be it.
And it's honestly, this is very on brand for Charlotte. It is the Charlotte way to aggressively push through and make things happen.
It harkens back to the arena. The voters, they put it up to a referendum of the voters, and the voters said, no, we don't want a new downtown arena, and that was resounding. And it was county commission, I think, said, okay, we're doing it anyway.
I wrote about that this morning, and I talked to Pat McCrory about that, and he and others at the time will say, well, can we all agree that this was a good decision? It has undoubtedly been an economic boon for Uptown.
Well, we elect people to represent us and make decisions on our behalf. And if they thought that was the right thing to do, then the courage of their convictions, good for them. And it turned out to be the right thing to do. The public was wrong and they were right. Right?
Well, yeah, in retrospect. However, could it also have been handled differently? And that's all we're calling out.
It's getting harder and harder to do this. You just spoke about the Charlotte way, and it used to be that announcements were made of things that were done deals, and you just can't do that anymore. And another thing that's getting harder
come on.
and harder.
This was a done deal from the get-go.
But we knew about it. I mean, this was the best kept secret in the world. You know, we were joking about what are we going to learn here today.
The new stadium is a done deal.
But let me just say
done deal.
But another hard thing is getting all of the public officials and city officials who are involved in these things to keep their mouths shut about it. And my colleague Steve Harrison has been following this issue, and he wrote a story this week about all the different ways that different city officials have described this money. It's that thing we were just talking about. We really don't know. Everybody has their own theory. What's the true story? And the idea here is they're not able to stick to one story.
So let's talk about this money, because Mayor Lyles says the money, the $110 million, is not pledged. This is a quote. It's in reserve, and it's in reserve as we complete development plans, the east side, as well as our entertainment district on the west side. What does that mean?
First of all, when we think of the West Side, we do not think of Uptown Charlotte.
No.
It's not.
West
this
Side
is not,
begins at I-77.
Correct. I mean, technically, it's west of Trade and Tryon, I guess.
Right.
But that's, look at the average.
And east of I-77.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I would argue with that description, but it is sort of poetic, I guess, if you want to balance it out. What was the question? Man, sorry.
Well, what does it mean that the money is not pledged? It's in reserve.
That is political doublespeak for saying we've already set aside money, but we can't legally say we've set aside money because we've done it in a backroom deal. Even when by the council takes a vote for economic development stuff, either immediately or at the same time when it approves incentives for Honeywell and other major businesses.
Also, that comparison is apples to oranges. When they approve business incentive grants, these businesses promise to create a certain number of jobs and contribute a certain amount to the tax base over a certain number of years before the city announces any sort of agreement. There is no such promise in place for the MLS. Let's be clear on that. This is not the same thing as Honeywell.
Or maybe
We got
there
to
is,
say
and
we
just
have
don't
an
know
MLS
about
team.
it.
Correct.
Well,
Then
may not be a promise in place, but David Tepper has said that if council decides on something less than $110 million, Rock Hill could easily be their fallback for the headquarters. He said, we have a lot of land. We can do it down there.
Yeah, I mean, I
And
don't
you
think
can
the
do the
city is in a
stadium down
good
there,
position
too.
to negotiate, because also we have to think about the Panthers' tether,
Right.
too.
Which is up this year.
Yes.
And that's the other thing, that when they approved the renovations in 2013, when the Panthers were rejected by the state in 2013, came back to the city for money, the city agreed to a 6-year tether because they were scared that Jerry Richardson would move the team. So they operated sort of in the dark and out of fear, and it was rushed.
Okay, we have to take a break. A few more things to talk about soccer, but we also have the Excelsior Club, which is going to have new life, or at least we think, and the battle for the beds between Atrium and Novant and more as the local news roundup continues on Charlotte Talks on WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and Charlotte Douglas International Airport, offering business valet parking to all travelers this holiday season and year-round, too. More at cltairport.com. And Blumenthal Performing Arts, presenting singer Tony Bennett, performing songs like I Left My Heart in San Francisco and many more from his career of over 60 years. February 16th at Belk Theater. Tickets at blumenthalarts.org. So, anything happen in Washington this week? For only the third time in this country's history, a president has been impeached. 7 of the Democrats running for president debated last night, and those are just a few of the stories they'll be talking about on 1A as the News Roundup continues with a national look at 10 and an international look at 11. Joshua Johnson on his final 1A edition, and his roundtable of reporters will be here in about 20 minutes. We'll continue with ours in just a moment. Stay with us.
It's your world. We help you explore it.
Some leaked documents offer an inside look at China's detention of Uyghurs.
It's your community. We help you understand it.
The Westside Community Land Trust is the first in Charlotte, founded in 2016 by residents concerned about rising housing prices and displacement of longtime residents.
WFAE's Morning Edition is an essential way to start your day and stay connected to your world. Listen weekday mornings from 5 to 9 on 90.7 WFAE.
It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE and WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. We're here with Nick Oxner, Chief Investigative Reporter for WBTV, Joe Bruno, reporter for WSOC-TV Channel 9, Katie Peralta, Senior Editor of Charlotte Agenda, and David Borax, reporter for WFAE News. A couple of final questions about this whole soccer thing. What about the name?
Yeah, that's one of the big unanswered questions from this week's announcement. And we did learn that some trademark applications have been filed for a bunch of possibilities: Charlotte Crown, Charlotte FC for football club, Charlottetown, Carolina Gliders, but we have no idea what the name is. I suspect that they will do some kind of fan engagement contest to try and drum up interest, and that when they get that together, we'll find out the name. They'll have a big unveiling. It'll be another marketing opportunity.
You know, David Tepper may turn out to be, I'm a little prognostication and it may not turn out to be true, but he may turn out to be a real game changer for Charlotte because, first of all, he's the richest person in town. Secondly, he owns 2 Major League Sports franchises. Now, he's going to control 2 big pieces of property, Eastland Mall and property down in Rock Hill. There's going to be a new stadium. You can just take it to the bank. But he says, quote, I want to do great things in the community, and that is the greater region around Charlotte. The Carolinas don't understand how great they can be. They really don't. He's all in on this city.
Yeah.
That's a very good thing.
Yeah. And this is a guy that takes pretty significant bets. That's how he got as rich as he is. He is confident in his decision making, and I think he saw Charlotte a while ago for, look at the city now. I mean, the city has grown, I don't even know how much since 2017, but we have like 100 people moving here every day. We just landed the 6th biggest bank headquarters in the nation. There are, Honeywell, as we've mentioned. I think there's more room for growth here than I think maybe arguably anywhere else in the country, and I think that he's poised to take advantage of that.
Joe.
And Mike, that's all the more reason why the city council may be trying to spend this $110 million right now, but they are not going to shortchange the man who has the potential to have the hugest impact since Hugh McCall.
I feel like we should note in all of this conversation that there has been some pushback on the idea of putting public funding into this, and apart from the fact that this money is designated for tourism and it has to be used for something that fits that, outside of the Mint Museum the other day, there was a couple standing with a sign that basically said, we need to put money towards arts, parks, and education. And remember, we just had the voters vote that down. But they were pushing back for that. We've also heard voices and comments on social media about the need to spend more money on affordable housing. And this money could not technically be spent on affordable housing, but those voices are here in the community, and that's one that I think we will continue to hear.
Nick, you talk about these tourism funds. My colleague David Hodges has been digging into how much tourism money is actually available that the city hasn't already obligated to something. And there's the rub. We don't have a whole lot more capacity past $110 million to issue new debt. So it actually begs the question, if we go beyond the $110 million, at least like $30 million left or something, certainly not enough to fund a new stadium. So then we would have to start or anything else that those dollars have to go to.
If you read the coverage of all this, and I did, it's like hearing an echo because, and I'll explain that in a moment, but here's an example written by Bria Bell from WBTV. She writes, "The soccer team has no official name, no logo or players, but the fans are itching to fill the seats on game day. Some fans even already have championship aspirations." This all sounds very much like the attitude and atmosphere that surrounded the acquisition of the original Charlotte Hornets. The city was all in. They had record sellouts for years when that team first came to town. So this kind of sounds, all of this sounds almost too good to be true. Could this be a bubble that will burst? Or is this, this is happening?
Haven't we been waiting for a bursting bubble in this city for years, and there hasn't been one?
By the way, $50 will get your name in the hat for a season ticket.
$50?
Yep.
That's a bargain.
To buy tickets.
To buy a ticket, that'll get you in line.
Okay. More good news this week when it came to the Westside. Came to the Westside when it was
the
announced,
actual Westside.
Thank you. Yes, when it was announced that the historic Excelsior Club will get another chance at life. Charlotte City Council unanimously approved $50,000 as part of a project for preserving and redeveloping the building. That's on top of a $50,000 contribution from the county. How will this money be used?
Basically, it's a loan. But if
the city's part
is a loan, and if the Excelsior Club is not renovated and there's not a certificate of occupancy by the end of 2024, the city gets that $50,000 back, as well as the other funding partners, the Knight Foundation, the Foundation for the Carolinas,
and the county.
Mecklenburg County. Yes.
Okay, so that's all. Is that for the? Is it for? It says for the restoration and preservation of the club's facade.
Yeah.
The interior of the building not of any use to anybody.
Correct. It's gutted. The building's in disrepair. The roof is falling in. They're going to try to save what they can, but for the most part, it's pretty much a demo and a redo.
So this new owner, it sounds like an investment group as opposed to a human being. It's California-based Kenwood Investments. What do they want to do with it?
They're talking about having an entertainment venue, possibly a boutique hotel and an art gallery, but they want to make sure that the history and the historical aspect of the Excelsior Club is really the star.
This is a chicken and the egg thing because if this is on Beatty's Ford Road in an underdeveloped corridor, and I just drove past the Excelsior Club a couple of days ago. If you blink, you miss it because it's kind of not prominent anymore because of it's in disrepair. Is there a market for a boutique hotel and an entertainment district on that part of in that part of town, or will this be the catalyst that revitalizes that whole area?
I think there is a market. You're so close to Johnson, C. Smith, and you're close to Uptown there. We've got the streetcar that's going in a short walk away as well. I think that a boutique hotel will.
And remember that whole West End area, which they call themselves the historic West End now, but that has been changing over the years, and it's no longer the neighborhood it once was. It's the housing values are going up, and there's a lot of gentrification there.
Newly elected District 2 Councilman Malcolm Graham said this project would have a humongous, his word, impact on the Beatty's Ford Road corridor, and that this decision to put some money into the project is good for all of our history, not just restricted to a specific district. And several speakers at Monday's council meeting agree, but they stressed the importance of this landmark to the African American community.
Please have it on your heart to know that our history does matter. And sadly, our history is going away.
Be aware that history does matter. African American history matters.
Okay, so back in the 1960s, we used to have these battles of the bands, and now Charlotte we're living through a battle of the beds. Our two rival hospital systems, Atrium Health and Novant Health, have each requested permission from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services to develop additional acute care beds and operating rooms in Mecklenburg County. Why do they have to ask permission?
So the state certificate of need law is set up to, in theory, control costs of health care and avoid duplication of services. And so they require everybody who wants to put in a new hospital bed, an operating room, a new kind of scanner, a kidney facility. All of those things must be approved by the State Department of Health and Human Services.
And the state does agree that we need more beds. And
76 beds they've allotted.
And 6 new operating rooms.
And that's what's up for grabs right now.
So Novant and Atrium want more. Novant has requested 1 operating room and 20 new acute care beds. Atrium wants 6 operating rooms and 76 beds. So that would take them all, unless the numbers change at the state level. How is this shortage, we must have a shortage, how is it impacting healthcare?
It just makes it harder to get. I mean, look, if you need a bed, my mother-in-law was in Charlotte, very sick earlier this year. It was hard trying to find a place for her to go. She ultimately went to CMC Maine, and she's fine now. But it is staggering that in this town, if you're really sick, you've got to wait a couple days before there's a hospital that can take you and put you in a bed.
So clearly we need these beds.
And some of these are in areas that are in the suburbs that have been growing very fast. Atrium wants to build a hospital in Cornelius with 30 beds. They want to add beds in Matthews. For Novant, they want to do it in the University City area and Pineville and their main facility.
So how and when will this decision be made? And will there likely be some beds going to Novant and some beds going to Atrium, or is one hospital system likely to get them all?
My sense is that they will divide it up, and the decision is supposed to be made by March 29th.
Okay.
There is a lot of angling in the General Assembly and debate over getting rid of these certificates of need because of situations. We could handle 96 beds instead of 76, and so this is exactly an example of why.
Maybe this is related, but why is there a limit on the number of beds that they can that they approve every year?
It's to kind of keep the supply and demand in equilibrium. I think that's the theory behind it. But again, that's the question that's being asked in the General Assembly year after year, especially from Republicans who are theoretically in support of less government control over private entities.
Yes, I thought the marketplace made decisions.
So there's been certificate of need reform. I think that's steps towards getting rid of certificates of need altogether, but we can't quite rip that Band-Aid off all the way.
So for the 4th time this year, former Governor Pat McCrory promised a big announcement on his radio show, which is opposite us. In January, he said he would not rule out a run for governor or Senate. In February, he said he wouldn't run in the 9th District. This summer, he announced he was doing a podcast. And now, another announcement.
Thousands of citizens have given me feedback on what they think I should do.
Boy, that's open-ended. Can you imagine what some of them said they think he should do? I kid, Pat. I kid you, Pat. Was it on the basis of what those citizens told him that he decided not to run again for governor?
He says he doesn't want to provide more division in the Republican Party.
And let's remember what happened in the last election. He was voted out of office, and I'm sure he's looking at that again. There is there's a group within the Republican Party that doesn't even think he's a real Republican. So,
except the thing that's really brought this to his announcement this week is a polling that continues to show he could beat Lieutenant Governor Dan Forest, who's the front runner for the Republican nomination for governor now.
And McCrory says that Governor Cooper can and should be beaten. We would expect that from the guy who beat him, but is he a little worried perhaps that if he ran again against Cooper and lost again, that would just be too much to take?
And remember, that'd be the 4th time he's run for governor.
Yeah, 4th time in a row.
He did not, however, rule out a run for Richard Burr's seat. Senator Burr has decided not to run again once his term is up in 2021, I guess.
22.
So that's an open seat. I think that sounds easier,
Mm-hmm. He would be up against, however, perhaps Mark Walker, a member of the U.S. House delegation from North Carolina, who has decided not to run for re-election in that seat in 2020. Walker joins North Carolina Republican Congressman Mark Meadows, this really surprised me, actually, a top Trump ally and leader of the House Freedom Caucus, who has also decided not to run for re-election. Why?
Well, 2 different reasons amongst the two. The speculation with Representative Meadows is that he's going to take some job inside the Trump administration. He's long been rumored as a chief of staff pick.
He said, my work with President Trump and his administration is only beginning.
And so that indicates there. Mark Walker, on the other hand, very different. As you recall, and as we've discussed on the show ad nauseum, there are new congressional districts that have been drawn. 2 districts in the state became more Democrat. One of those districts is the district in which Mark Walker currently resides, and so he could not get reelected in all likelihood, to his current district. And he thought about running for lieutenant governor and decided against it and some other things and said, no, he's just going to sit it out for now.
After Pat McCrory said he's not running for governor, Mark Walker put out a statement kind of throwing shade at him. He said, I hope Pat McCrory will join me in recognizing Dan Forest is a strong conservative leader and the best candidate to win back the governor's mansion in 2020. North Carolina wants fresh candidates who have consistently won their elections. And, of course, Walker's thinking about running in the same race that McCrory is now.
And another North Carolina Republican Congressman, George Holding from Raleigh, has also announced he will not run again.
He has the same problem as Mark Walker. He's the second of the two districts that are now significantly more Democrat.
Okay. On Wednesday, Donald Trump, it was his 1,062nd day in office. The U.S. House of Representatives passed 2 articles of impeachment against him for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. They'll be talking about this a lot on 1A. The vote was split along party lines, but there were a few defections among the Democrats. No defectors in North Carolina's congressional delegation. Alma Adams spoke around noon on Wednesday. She said the evidence shows that the president put his interests above those of the country. G.K. Butterfield said since taking office nearly 3 years ago, President Trump has consistently and intentionally divided this country. He has consistently encouraged foreign actors to interfere in our elections. But Republicans, Greg Murphy and Virginia Fox, cited Alexander Hamilton's writings. They didn't rap. They just cited his writings in the Federalist Papers. Murphy said this is a tragic day in our nation's history. We have individuals that hate this president more than they love this country. And Fox proclaimed these empty, baseless articles expose for the American people what this is, a desperate partisan attempt to avenge the loss of the Democrats' preferred candidate in 2016. Party lines.
This should make the RNC next summer very interesting.
Well, I was going to ask about that. What does that mean for the RNC?
Actually, I like the line that Jim Morrill in The Observer wrote this week where he said, never before has an impeached president been nominated for a second term until next year in Charlotte.
That's right.
It's dramatic.
How do you think this might affect both what happens inside Convention Hall and what happens outside?
I mean, I think that they're preparing for the worst in terms of what happens outside the convention hall. It doesn't seem to really bother Trump's core supporters, though, right?
Yeah, I don't think it impacts the inside at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to get a quick update from Nick, because the last time you were here, you spoke about families of wartime veterans who discovered around the week of Thanksgiving that the state would only pay for about half of the promised amount of room and board as part of scholarships awarded to children of parents killed in action or who are 100% disabled as a result of their military service. You have an update on that?
Yes. On Monday, the governor announced that he has ordered the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs to pay the full amount of room and board. He's doing it by taking money set aside to pay the spring semester scholarships. That means now they're going to have to go back to the General Assembly and ask for more money. The General Assembly will reconvene in January, and I'm told they will appropriate additional funds.
Okay. So the Pro Bowl is January 26th in Orlando, and will feature Christian McCaffrey and Luke Kuechly. Luke Kuechly's been back. This is his 7th consecutive appearance and the first for McCaffrey. So congratulations to them, and so ends 2019.